transitioning into sovereignty and freedom and being unbridled, do you feel, because obviously you're an ambitious woman, right? Like you're not just like staying at home, and there's nothing wrong with that, but like you're not just staying at home and like being a housewife. Like you also have this amazing brand that you're building and you're an entrepreneur. You're still obviously very soft and feminine at the same
Oh.
time. So how do you balance out, I guess, that interdependence with a relationship instead of being codependent with a relationship? So like how do you not lose yourself in a romantic relationship with someone else? And then how do you not also become so independent that there is not that overlap?
Yeah, I mean, girl, isn't that the question of the millennia? It's like, wow, I think it's much harder for relationships now than it ever has been before. And I think that that's something that you have to navigate with each person, right? And it's also, from my point of view, something that evolves and changes consistently. So if you're not willing to really take the time to look into your relationship and adjust for each other, it's not going to work. Don't get married. It's hard. It's like, this is not an easy route. You're asking two people that are completely different, regardless of what, your values are and all of that, genetically completely different, to say, hey, we're going to make this work. And so to me, it's definitely been an evolution with Charles. And I mean, after 12 years, we've gone through a lot of evolving, I feel like.
Mm-hmm.
But it's probably the number one thing I think is being able to give grace to each other
Mm-hmm.
and remember that, like, I want this person to be happy. That's what I care most about, whether it's happy with me or not, right? If you truly love someone, then you can say that. And I know I've had people be like, oh, you guys, this or that. And it's like, I really don't care what you think because I know that I truly love that man more than, I mean, I think that he showed me what true love was.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not controlling someone. It's not having someone by your side. It's that I love you so much that I'm going to support you in what makes you happy and joyful, whether or not that works for me sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's willing to put the other person's joy and happiness above yours momentarily and not lose the fact that you still have to prioritize yours. So I think that ebbs and flows at times, right? Because you're both giving and taking.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that answered your question, but I think it's just being okay with understanding that it's not always 50-50. Sometimes I give 80, sometimes he gives 20, sometimes he gives 99 and I'm only able to give 1, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we had a funny conversation the other day and I was just like, look, the PMS week, I cannot physically carry the emotional weight of our relationship. The other weeks of the month, I'm stellar at it because he has very low EQ, very high IQ, and I have very high EQ. So it's easy for me usually to balance and manage that. But I have learned over time that that week I'm tired, right?
Mm-hmm.
I need all of my energy to be focused on Elisha. So if our relationship needs support, I'm going to need you to do it then. And he was like, wow, you've never said it that way before, but I get it. I was
Mm-hmm.
like, wow, just takes communication.
Mm-hmm. That's kind of like the answer to everything when it comes
Yeah.
to relationship is communication.
Yeah.
And that, I think, the part that a lot of people miss out, including myself, is the active listening. And not just like, I know exactly what I'm going to say to prove my point, but the active listening and then offering a safe space for them to be honest and vulnerable and then problem solve. It's like, what is the goal of this conversation? Is it to end up together and to fix and heal what needs mending? Or is it to prove a point and say that I was right, or to make you feel like shit, or
Yeah.
point out your flaws or your mistakes? So you kind of have to navigate it through that perspective.
That lens of we're a team. Like,
Right.
for real, we're a team. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not about what's right or wrong. It's about what gets the team to the end goal,
Mm-hmm.
right? I
Yeah.
think that's a hard one, or at least it was for me, to really believe that we were a team. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, are we really? Or,
Mm-hmm.
and so really truly accepting that and then being willing to say, you know what, I'm going to trust that we are because that's the commitment we made to each other until you show me something different.
Mm-hmm.
So that's still leaving the space for you to let them prove what team means to them too, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we're not saying just be abused. It's like, no, be cognizant of everything that's going on, but be a team player.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of a piece of advice I got that I always try to remember and not always, like, I'm obviously not perfect, is to always assume the best out of your partner.
Yeah.
So when something happens that ticks you off, that you're like, okay, well, if I'm assuming the best out of him right now, like, what is the reason that this thing happened? And then it can easily get you in a place where you can calm down. And it's
Mhm.
in my case, it's usually right. So my husband has pretty bad ADD and he does a lot to mitigate it. Like he does a ton of meditating and introspective work, and very rarely does he take any medication for it. So he's like trying to, kind of contain it himself. And there are times where he is a lot more present than others. And then
Mm.
there is times where he is not. And one of my biggest pet peeves is like repeating myself or feeling like I'm not heard.
Yeah.
And I'll say something, and if I'm in a good place, I can like breathe and pause. And I'm like, he'll come back in like 10 seconds and I'll be like, oh, where were you, babe? Like what
Yeah.
were you thinking about? Like what were you dreaming about? And then you like playful and it's fine. And there's other times where I am, have a short fuse and I'm not having a good day and I'm not like to the standard that I want to be at. And I'm like, what the fuck? You
Yeah.
didn't hear me? How dare you never listen to me? The Gottman's test and predictability for relationships is being acknowledged.
Yeah.
Just acknowledge me
Yeah.
and all these things. And he's just like, oh my gosh, he's like, did you not see that I just came in, or I was like finishing a text or an
Yeah.
email? Like there's maybe something I didn't notice that was a signal to like pause and wait for him to be in a position to be receptive to my question.
Yeah.
Not all about me. Like I'm
Yeah.
not on my phone, so you need to be paying attention to me right now.
Isn't it funny how that's how we are? It's like I'm talking, so the world stops.
Yeah.
I know I got burned alive for this one, but something that works for Charles and I is when I want to speak to him, I just ask, hey, babe, is now a convenient time? I probably need 2 or 3 minutes from you for this topic. And you're like, oh my God, that's so businessy. And I'm like, oh my God, we don't fight that way. And he listens. So whatever works for you, because for men, it's about convenience. For women, it's about comfortability. So when he comes to ask me for something, he asks if it's a comfortable time. And I'm just like, I think it's so sweet. And it's just like, hey, dude, we all have so many things going on in our heads. Like, it might look like I'm doing nothing, but I'm thinking a million things. So if you want to connect, prioritize that by asking, is now a good time? It's common courtesy. Like, I think we forget it because it's so common to be together, right? So we forget that this is another person. We're not connected,
Yeah.
And so common courtesy still applies.
We don't give that to our partners.
No.
Sometimes, and I say I should speak for myself.
Well, I'll agree with you because
Yeah.
me too. I know I'm guilty.
I do not offer that to Eric a lot. Like there are times where I'm way more demanding and way more cold or abrasive than I would be with almost anyone
course.
else, because
'Cause
you
you
get
feel
so
safe.
comfortable.
Yeah.
So I guess, yeah, like at least I feel safe, but he doesn't deserve that. So it's also being like, how would I treat anyone else in this position? Like, don't let yourself get too comfortable to where you're not treating your partner how they deserve to be treated.
Yeah. It's they say that kids do this too, right? So they save their worst behavior for their parent.
They do.
Yeah, they do.
They do.
That's so it's like it's a huge compliment because it means they feel safe with you. With